some of the whys may not be there now, but were there when it developed, and now the behaviors are very conditioned. In order to truly build coping skills, to be able to truly overcome this, they need to be able to understand, to gain that control, meeting them where they're at with compassion, understanding connection, comfort, or critical, but meeting them where they're at.
Welcome back to another episode of the Unspoken Words podcast, a Selective Mutism podcast by the Smart Center, produced and published by New Edition Productions. This episode features our latest installment of our Ask Dr. E series, where we answer real questions from our listeners. In this episode, we answer 5 questions, including ideal summer jobs for a teen with selective mutism, how to distinguish between selective mutism and a conscious decision not to speak, relocating schools for a 4-year-old with selective mutism now versus in a few years, and more. Before we get started, remember, if you have any questions on anything you hear in today's episode or any episode of Unspoken Words, please head to selectivemutismcenter.org/Ask Dr. E. That's ASKDRE, and enter your question. We read all your submissions and we do our best to answer them on podcast episodes, blog posts, and on social media. And speaking of social media, make sure you're following the podcast on Instagram and on YouTube. We are at Unspoken Words _podcast on Instagram and Unspoken Words podcast by Dr. E on YouTube. So without further ado, please enjoy the latest episode of the Unspoken Words podcast.
Hi everyone, it's Dr. E. Before we get started with today's episode, I'm so excited to announce that our popular Selective Mutism in the School virtual conference is now available as a self-paced online course. The conference dives into how to assess the mute child, testing for common comorbidities, and proven strategies and interventions to support students with SM within the school. And of course, we dive into accommodations and interventions such as 504s and IEPs. The course offers 5.5 continuing education credits from most professionals, so parents, share this opportunity with your child's school. To sign up, just head to our website or check the description in this podcast episode. Together, we can create a world where every child has a voice. Now, enjoy the episode.
Hey, Dr. E.
Hey, how are you, Brandon?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm good. It's a busy time. Going a little nutso, getting excited about Communicamp. So much stuff is happening. We're going to have, because it's actual parents and individuals with SM. Sometimes we've had even teens write in and older kids write in. We need to do more of that, where the kids write in. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we just hit 3 years of Unspoken Words a couple weeks ago, which we're about to post about on social media. 67,000 listeners. I think we've had listeners in over 100 countries. It's been pretty cool. It's been pretty cool to see it grow. It's been 100% organic too. We haven't really done anything paid. It's just been growing in the community.
Yeah, no, that's great. We get so much feedback when families call us that they listen to it. I had a family recently that said she listens to every single episode. She's on episode 23. And it was really cool to hear that. And the families, it's really neat though, because prior to the podcast, people had read about my work. And now from the podcast of listening to me speak, they come in like knowing me really well.
Yeah.
And so I feel like they know me really well and I'm just getting to know them. So it's kind of interesting. Whereas in the past, it was like, even though they read my work, saw me, maybe heard me speak at conferences, came to camp, then they got to know me. But this is like they're coming already knowing me. And it really makes me feel good because, as you said, we're at 3 years. But I really thank you for so much of your hard work in getting this podcast produced. And of course, like Lisa Marie and our team in general, it's just been wonderful. And, my primary reason for doing this is that it's been so many years, my entire life, my passion, trying to get it out of my head. And so this was the vehicle to really get it out and just talk about it. So I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, it's been fun. I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying doing it as well. Our Ask Dr. E episodes are always fan favorites, always perform well. So I want to get going. We have 5 really good questions, all different ages of questions of different age children and teens. And I think there's a lot of good value here that you're gonna open up for listeners. So you ready to get going?
I am always ready to get going and talk SM. So let's go.
All right, let's jump into it. Question number 1. My 8-year-old son was completely mute in restaurants and public settings, and then after treatment began, he became more audible but unexpectedly loud and inappropriate in restaurants. How can I support him in managing his public behaviors without causing stress around his communication?
So this is a great question. I don't hear this often that a child would be getting loud and inappropriate, but I'll kind of explain what might be going on. So here's how I see this. The child was pretty kind of either shut down, inhibited, didn't have the tools, didn't really know how to make the changes. Most likely this parent who entered treatment was taught skills herself or himself as to how to help their child make progress, which probably involved, social engagement, which helped him become more involved, probably instead of answering for the child, started to bring the child into social communication where the child's now an active participant. And so the parent has unlearned or is unlearning their kind of enabling or their high pressure approach. And now the child is more of a participant. And what has happened is the child is kind of he's only 8 years old, still young, is experimenting, getting out there, finding their voice, being more audible, progressing across the bridge, maybe through sounds or inappropriate ways of interacting is what is probably confusing a little bit to me. What that means is most individuals at 8 years old know kind of what's appropriate and not appropriate. They have kind of an awareness to that. If this is not the case and the parent is seeing a lot of what I call inappropriate behaviors, inappropriate verbalizations, then I would wonder what it may be going on developmentally with this child. Is this child very young? Why it may not be that, and it might be a neurotypical child just experimenting, is the child is still 8, right? Still little, but not too little, and experimenting and having fun, and maybe a way to get some attention from either siblings, and just experimenting. It's almost like I found my voice, or kind of, and feeling maybe pretty good. So I think that there's angles to see it as a neurotypical 8-year-old child that's experimenting, finding their voice, and that's it. And now the parent needs to kind of figure out how to help that child, which I'll get to. Or is this child a bit delayed? I would think if this child had some delays, let's face it, we do have kids with delays. We have kids that are on the autism spectrum. By no means am I saying this, but sometimes you see these inappropriate behaviors, but it would be across the board. It wouldn't just be in this isolated situation in a restaurant. So if it's not across the board, that the child is not acting inappropriate ongoing in all settings now that he found his voice, because you can be inappropriate non-verbally. Assuming this child is neurotypical and not any sort of developmental social delays, emotional delays on the autism spectrum, has a neurodivergent situation going on, I would say that at 8 years old, a really big part of treatment is helping a child acknowledge and assess. In other words, acknowledge that it can be hard or scary to use words. They learn about the bridge. They know where they're at on the bridge. I mean, this is not something we ignore. We don't just do treatment and just hope for the best, because then the child doesn't have the control. So understanding the bridge and where they are, understanding when words are coming out and when they're not. We talk about this with the kids, because in order to truly build coping skills, to be able to truly overcome this, they need to be able to understand, to gain that control. So having an open conversation and saying, hey, seems like you're crossing the bridge and you're finding your voice, and this is awesome. You must feel very comfortable. I always say that. You must feel very comfortable. That's awesome. But you know what? There's a lot of people around. Let's kind of keep the volume a little lower. And maybe the child will laugh or goof off and may even say, oh, you always tell me, you used to say I should use my voice. Now I'm using my voice. The parent could say, and you must be comfortable right now. And that's awesome. But we're in a restaurant and there's a lot of people here. One message I'd like to give to our listeners is we don't want to talk to our child in a way that is not open and honest. When you talk to kids that begin to overcome this, one of the things they appreciate is how people are meeting them where they are, talking to them pretty matter-of-factly. And again, the child is 8, they're not 3. So you can have an open dialogue. What would you say to a child that's 8 years old that doesn't have SM, but acting inappropriate in a restaurant? What would you say to them? And that's how you talk to them. You don't want to treat them in a special way and say, well, oh, he's found his voice, so I'm just going to let it go. No, you talk as if he is doing something that may not be socially appropriate, but definitely validate that he's feeling comfortable and moving across the bridge and excited that he doesn't seem to be as uncomfortable, and happy for him. But if this mother or father says, you know what, our child has had some inappropriate behaviors globally, because he wasn't speaking in so many settings, it wasn't as noticeable, it wasn't as obvious. But when we really do an inventory, the child does have some atypical behaviors. That's where you may want to look into some other things that may be going on and kind of keep your antenna up as to, could this be a more delayed child in certain areas? Maybe there is something else going on like ASD or something.
Let's move on to question number 2. My 15-year-old daughter is a teen and still working through her SM treatment. She is not verbal with adults other than my mom, husband, and myself, but she wants to get a job this summer. What kind of jobs do you recommend for a teen with selective mutism?
So selective mutism meaning mute in this case. So it's the question you said is that she is still mute with adults. So a big part of treatment, and I said this in the previous question, even with the 8-year-old, is helping an individual understand themselves. At 15, absolutely, so much of treatment is working with this 15-year-old, teaching her about her feelings, understanding where she's on the bridge, working through strategies to find her voice. Often as teens make the progress, like still mute, I would say, is this a speech phobic, where the child is, we're going to hold off on the job in a second, because what I find is most teens do have a voice. They may not be initiative, elaborative, and expressive. They may lack a lot of confidence when it comes to certain populations, such as adults, because maybe, they haven't had as much experience with them, or it's been very learned and conditioned. So then you're thinking maybe there's a speech phobia going on. And so with adults, helping to make that progress through the use of a verbal intermediary, very conscious use of a verbal intermediary with a parent, but also using sounds to words to unlearn their conditioned mutism with adults. Now, with that said, we have to see kind of where she's at. She's still mute with adults. So that to me would be a very critical aspect to treatment as to what is holding her back with adults. Is she verbal, just not initiative, expressive, and elaborative? Doesn't know how to start conversations, continue conversations? So in other words, she has a voice, but it's quiet and not consistent. Or is she truly mute with adults, so that when an adult asks her a question, completely mute? Based on those answers would dictate how we alter the treatment, whether we're focusing more on sounds to words. But at the same time, with a 15-year-old, I would talk about the use of an intermediary with another adult or someone this child or this teen feels comfortable with, practicing that in the real world, practicing it with teachers, with either a peer if she's verbal with peers, going into stores and restaurants, approaching them, excuse me, miss, can you help us? Sally, are we looking for this or that? No answer, this or that, lean in. So starting to help the child cross the bridge with that cognitive awareness. And that's something we would individualize in treatment. But if the parent's saying, look, right now she's completely mute, we really are supporting her desire to have a job, here's what I would say. I would say this could be a motivating factor in her treatment to work through these strategies, because she absolutely can overcome this. This shouldn't be like a forever thing where she's mute with adults and let's just get through life. It's really working through it. And most teens don't take that long as you dive into the transitional stage of communication, really work through that cognitive awareness of the bridge, feelings, and so forth. But if there is going to be a job, let's face it, we need to be in a situation where there's trusted adults that know how to understand and support this teen, because if she doesn't have a voice, we need to have a way for her to communicate in a comfortable, safe way. Are there family and friends who she can work with this summer? Maybe it isn't as front-facing. Maybe it's more in the back end, just because interacting with, let's think about it. What would a 15-year-old do as far as a job goes? We can work, if she loves animals, in a veterinary office, in a shelter, working with the animal. Right. Well, in a restaurant, what would she do? She has to talk to people most of the time.
Yeah.
You can't be mute in a restaurant with customers. Working in a store at a cashier, you can't be mute with a cashier. So you really have to pick either a back-facing job where there's trusted adults, where she's doing more back-end stuff like office work or kind of, working with animals, things like that. And
Is it
so what?
is it a situation where similar to what you would recommend for how to get a child to feel comfortable, go in the areas of their interests, right? Is that something that's applicable here?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. What are her interests? But we also have to think about she's still mute. So this could be a motivating factor for her to push through as she works through treatment. I'm assuming she's working with a professional that has expertise in SM and knows how to move her through the transitional stage, because she's stuck in the nonverbal with adults. So it's a big focus on stage 2 to progress into stage 3. But then even when teens get into stage 3, they still need to tend to work on initiation, elaboration, and expression through a lot of different types of strategies that we do use to help them become more, action plans, I just statements, sandwich-based questions, copy back, conversation starters. There's an array of things that we do. And that's what this teen would need to work on. So as far as a job goes, absolutely high interest. But maybe there's things that either in the home she can do for now, maybe with a friend volunteering in, let's say, somewhere where she has a verbal friend that can act as an intermediary. So maybe I had a child that was mute that did actually stocking in the back end of a store, working for their parent, front facing, just, taking someone back somewhere with a trusted adult or a trusted peer that she can use as an intermediary. It's also important to really talk to this teen about what she wants to do, but we can't have her in a front-facing situation where verbal expectations are expected, because we don't want to treat her as if she has if she has SM and has the ability to speak. We want to kind of meet her where she's at, but also help her understand that if you want a job that is front facing, this is a reason we're in therapy. And that often is a motivating factor.
Yeah. Like that.
But family
Okay.
and friends is a good area,
Got it. Yeah.
and practicing skills. What I would say is maybe we spend this summer really working on more front facing with a trusted adult, not so much as a job, but as a helper. Like I had a 17-year-old that would go with her parent into the stores, go up to the pharmacy. They practiced their exposures because the child became motivated. I do want to work in that preschool summer camp, or I really want to work and, clerk somewhere. I really want to, be a counselor at, a tennis camp. Well, it's hard to do that when you're mute completely.
Yeah. It's definitely a good motivator.
It's a motivating factor to maybe really work on skills so that next summer it can be a paid job. Nothing wrong with that. It's meeting her where
Baby
she's
steps.
at. It's not pressuring her and saying, well, if you talk, you can do it. You're saying, look, I get it. It's hard. And we're going to work really hard this summer so that you can get that job next summer. And we're going to do whatever we can to work with you to make this happen because we know this is important to you. Very different than, if you could just talk, then you'd get the job you want. And then that child feels shame and doesn't feel good about herself.
All right, let's move on to question number 3. I'm a school-based therapist, and I'm looking for strategies I use with an 8-year-old student who has selective mutism but appears to also have oppositional behaviors, only speaking when motivated by specific rewards. Any tips here would be helpful.
So I think our listeners are going to probably predict what I might say here. I don't know anything about this 8-year-old other than some oppositional behaviors, has SM, and motivated by rewards. When we are giving school-based recommendations, accommodations, interventions for a child with SM and training, the therapist, we understand that child. Like we do the selective mutism evaluation to determine the whys, what might be causing it, but what might be maintaining the mute behaviors, but also their baseline stages. It sounds like this oppositional behavior may be a push-pull battle, often with a child that doesn't understand themselves and almost like kind of acting defiant, but we need to read between the lines. I've never met an individual with SM that has true oppositional defiant behaviors regarding the SM. It's often a result of their inner frustration and their lack of understanding.
What does it mean when she mentions that she's only motivated by specific rewards. I mean, we're all incentivized by rewards. So like, what is she getting at there? What are specific rewards
I
here?
can imagine that it might be quiet speech. It's not fully elaborate, initiative, expressive speech where she's now like, that level of like lack of verbalization is not occurring. There's a reason this child isn't speaking. And then if the teacher says, well, I'll give you a sticker or I'll give you points if you're able to answer that question, that child may have like you said, a push to do it. So maybe if the teacher says, what is the answer to this question? And the child is sitting there and the teacher says, well, is the answer, 5 plus 5 is 10 or 5 plus 5 is 11. And we're going to see how many points we can get. And the child's motivated to get points to get a reward. The child may write down 10, but might say 10. So has enough oomph to get a word out, enters verbal, but it's motivated by rewards. Whereas maybe the oppositional defiance comes in from their lack of confidence in their social communication skills to begin with. Is there any learning challenges with this child? Does she struggle with completing tasks? Is she distractible? What else may be going on? Does she have appropriate social skills? Does she have a connection to peers? Comfort, connection precedes communication. Is she disconnected from peers? Are they meeting her where she's at? Oppositional defiant behaviors itself surrounding the SM. I want to be clear with this. This is really, really important. Oppositional defiant disorder does not cause SM. A child with SM that is manifesting oppositional behaviors is usually a child that is being very misunderstood. There's something being missed, and this child is putting a defense up if that's related to SM. So I want all of our listeners to understand oppositional defiance does not cause SM at all. Never seen it, doesn't. But oppositional behaviors that exist means this child is feeling frustrated, misunderstood, has a defense mechanism, and we need to dive deeper into these whys. We need to figure it out, and we have to see where they are on the bridge. Are they connected? Do they feel comfortable? Are they completing work on time? Academically, where are they? What is going on with this child?
Hey listeners, we'll get back to the episode in a second. I want to tell you about Communicamp, our popular 3+ day intensive group treatment and all-day parent education and support program designed to help parents, children, and teens overcome selective mutism, social anxiety, and extreme shyness. Over 3+ action-packed days, your child or teen will engage in immersive activities guided by expert clinicians that build confidence and communication skills in a supportive, fun, and collaborative environment. Spaces are limited and spots book up fast. To learn more, please find Communicamp in this episode's description or head to communicamp.org and complete our interest form, and our team will be in touch. Let's help your child or teen find their voice at Communicamp. Let's get back to the episode.
All right, cool. Let's move on to question number 4. My child is 16 years old. How do you ascertain whether someone is nonverbal due to selective mutism and not due to a conscious decision not to speak?
So, selective mutism doesn't cause anything. It is a result of. What that means here is that again, I always use my experience. If an individual has selective mutism, is mute in at least one setting, and there's a consistency there, they have a reason as to why that occurred. It may not be as obvious now because we're talking 16 years old. So many, many years have gone by where this child is probably mute or conditioned mute, right? And so they may look comfortable, right? But they're not speaking. And so what's confusing to this individual, this parent, is why is my child not speaking? She looks comfortable. She's choosing this. No, she has learned to kind of exist in this world mute because, one, she doesn't understand herself. And in addition to that, this child is misunderstood, right? They haven't figured out the whys, the baseline stages, what strategies to work, getting this child actively involved in their treatment to overcome their SM. So a child doesn't choose mutism. It's a result of something that is not found here yet. And so what I would say is coming at it from a compassionate way and really working with this child on their own social communication anxiety inventory and their own bridge to know where they are in different settings, to understand why this child may not be speaking. Very often the whys of SM for many teens started very young. And even maybe they develop skills, but their conditioned behavior stuck around. Like maybe they were a very sensory sensitive child when they were young. So louder, larger, lots of people environments overwhelmed them and they weren't communicating, or they had a developmental delay in speech and language, but then developed the skills. They grew into their sensory system. And those issues aren't there as much. Maybe they were bilingual and weren't comfortable in the language. Now they have the language, but those behaviors became very conditioned and now they're stuck. And so it's about helping kind of rule out some present whys, right? That could be making it continue, but helping them unlearn their conditioned behavior. So I want our listeners to understand that some of the whys may not be there now, but were there when it developed. And now the behaviors are very conditioned. And so I would say to meet that teen where they're at, very open, honest, talk about the bridge, talk about feelings, seemingly helping them realize this is hard and we get it. Can't go through life like this, but we're going to help you and we're going to meet together and really work through this so that you are able to, engage and communicate. Now, you may have a teen at this point that's like, I don't really care. I don't really want to do it. Leave me alone. I don't, I'm no desire. That is kind of an oppositional way of reacting as a defense mechanism because they don't know how. When you don't know how to do something, when you can't do it well, when you don't have confidence in something, what it does is it causes avoidance, it causes more anxiety when you think about it. So you become even more avoidant and you just start to make excuses. You start to say, I don't like them anyway. My teacher's mean to me. I don't really care about math, and because math may be hard. So they start to do that. And so what I would say to this family is, let's figure out the whys together. Let's talk with this child. When we work with teens, it's tough because a lot of times they come to us already very conditioned. Parents are very conditioned. So a lot of it is helping them become unconditioned, but it's meeting them where they're at. It's the compassionateness of, it's not, you need to talk like you've got to talk like you've got to, you can't go through, and talking to them almost like at them, you need to, you should, versus meeting them where they're at with compassion, understanding connection, comfort, or critical, but meeting them where they're at. And the bridge is such a beautiful, beautiful tool because it's very matter of fact. It's very much about giving them the control and then working through treatment so that they can become a more confident social verbal communicator.
Is a teen's decision not to speak, is that something that could be considered oppositional?
It could be, but I really would want to rephrase this. What if we said, this teen can't? He's not choosing. One of my biggest pet peeves is people seeing children or teens as individuals that are choosing and refusing because they aren't choosing and refusing. They can't. And their behaviors become very learned and conditioned, and they can seem a bit oppositional or uninterested and not motivated. But if we begin to meet them where they're at, they start to open up. I mean, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teens. And I will say, as if these parents make this commitment to treatment, I always say, give me 6 months. 6 months. Give me 6 months. And 6 months could be once a month working, maybe an intensive, and then once a month. Communicamp, maybe an intensive, individual intensive, and then working. Give me 6 months. You are going to see progress at every single visit because in addition to the child, the teen, we are now training parents to be able to meet that child where they're at, how to talk to their child to support them rather than make them feel pressured or shamed. You need to, you should, like that's your goal to go up to the store clerk and ask a question. And if you do that, you'll get, and the child can't. So now you're seeing an avoidance and maybe oppositional behaviors. And now the child doesn't even want to go out. Like you see this. So it's the parents unlearning their conditioned ways and helping meet that individual where they're at. There's one of my favorite statements. Courage isn't loud. And maybe for this teen, just connecting with others in their areas of interest is a first step.
Yeah.
to find something that motivates them that they like rather than go up and talk.
Yeah.
It's really about, I keep saying it, meeting them where they're at.
That's the theme of this episode, meeting them where they're at.
Meeting them where they're at, because it's the truth. I would say that so many families come to the Smart Center where the parents are over here, the child or teen is over here. It doesn't work like that because the child feels uncomfortable. They feel often shame. They feel that they can't, and that affects their confidence, their sense of self. But if we can meet them where they're at and together we move forward with the right strategies, the right interventions, it's a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah.
And you see this even at Communicamp. You see these in our intensives. You see it. You see these children start to sit up straight, to gain that confidence, a bit of swag develop. That is connection, comfort, increases confidence, which with the right facilitation stimulates further social communication, and they become a more confident social communicator.
Courage isn't loud. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, that's my new statement. Courage isn't loud.
All right. Let's move on to the last question of this episode. Question number 5. How will relocating to a Spanish-speaking country in Central America affect my 4-year-old daughter who has selective mutism and already struggles to speak at her current Montessori school? Is it better to do this while she is young, she's currently 4, versus when she is older?
So what I don't know with this question is this child a Spanish-speaking child now? So Spanish is their more native language, and she's is selectively mute within the school setting because she was a Spanish-speaking child and entered into an English-speaking preschool. And so as a result, wasn't as comfortable with the language and was going through what we call the natural silent period. And the child, wasn't able to be verbal at that moment, at that time, and then it became reinforced. Is she a sensory sensitive child? So louder, larger, lots of people environments, like a busy classroom? There's so many things that go on with this question that I don't know that could be going on. If she is an English-speaking child, living in the U.S. and now moving to a Spanish-speaking environment, Central America, but she speaks English and she has selective mutism, yes, it's going to be harder. And the reason it's going to be harder is unless she's speaking Spanish now, where she has confidence in that language, it's going to be harder because now she's going to be speaking in Spanish and she may not know it. So if there's a way and the family wants to move, and I know what you're going to ask me, like, should we do it now or later? I would say you as a family make a decision. If this is the best time for you as a family to move, then move. Your child will build the skills. But what I would say is maybe put her in an English immersion school till she can overcome her SM and build her Spanish speaking skills. And then what you can do is teach her Spanish on the side so she can function in the world. And then as she gets a little older, maybe next year, maybe 2 years, put her more in a Spanish speaking school if you plan to live there. And you can practice your skills, English speaking, in the restaurants and stores within the environment. But teach her Spanish, make it fun, upbeat, and practice those skills in Spanish speaking through pictures, few words. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
Despite me taking 4 or 5 years of Spanish in high school, I don't know a whole lot. I know my numbers, my colors, Brandon.
Well, I remember when I was a kid, I was 7 and I was in 2nd grade, and you pulled me out of my school and took me to another school, and I know I had a really tough time with it. That said, it was definitely better than going through that when I was probably in 4th or 5th grade.
Yeah, for sure. We moved schools because we had to. And so as you remember back, it was hard to go into a new school where you already had your friends, for a couple years, but we tried to integrate you, slowly. I mean, back then, you didn't have selective mutism, but you found friends and we did play dates and we did the natural stuff that a parent would do, met with the teacher and did all the basic stuff that you would do with any child, SM or not, to help them get comfortable in the school. We toured the school. All of those things are going to help any child transitioning to a different school and moving to a whole new country, a whole new culture. Yeah, you can make it work, but
the earlier the better, though.
Yeah, the earlier the better. I mean,
yeah.
Or if you want to wait till she has more cognitive awareness and development, grows up a little more and you have that choice, that's okay. But it would be, to me, either do it now or in many, many, many years. And at that point, I don't know. I would say do it, but you're just going to have to understand that This isn't going to move as quick as you want it to move. And there's a lot of things we need to put in place for your child to have, the confidence, helping them become comfortable, connected, comfort and connection is so critical. Often it's a lot of, push to speak, being brave to talk, where when the child doesn't have the comfort and the connection, I see this across the board. That is the fuel. That is the base of what we need. And it's not always about talking right away. It's about the comfort, the connection, and then using skills to help with progression, but meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, I can't imagine how difficult it must be for someone who has SM to not only have to deal with that individually, but also speaking another language and learning another language.
Absolutely. But the child is 4, very young.
Right.
And I assume they're going either the child already speaks Spanish or they're going to teach the child Spanish. And so hopefully, the parents are working with a clinician that can really support them through this. I know for us, when a family is living overseas, because we work with a lot of families international, we do parent coaching and training. So, the family can certainly contact us, or they can work with a clinician that can help support them to really kind of figure out what strategies, interventions, but how do we build that comfort connection? Educating the school here is going to be critical. 100%. You cannot do this without the school's involvement. So they have to work with the school, and they need a professional to educate that school on that child's needs, because you could have another 4-year-old with completely different needs that's doing the same move, but their strategies, interventions are going to differ. The good news is with a very young child, this shouldn't be long, assuming the child is a neurotypical child,
Right.
and a 4-year-old that is developmentally a 4-year-old, socially, emotionally, skill-wise, and so forth.
That's a wrap on this episode of Ask Dr. E. 5 really, really interesting questions, all different. We got through it, and I'm excited to put this episode out. Any last words before we sign off for the episode?
Yeah, I would say that there is a lot of what I call meat and potatoes in these questions. I would say an overwhelming theme to this is knowing each child's individual needs, meeting them where they're at. No child chooses or refuses this, that an avoidance and oppositional behavior is the child's message of feeling misunderstood, frustrated themselves, perhaps the adults in their life not understanding their true needs and where they're at, to try to meet the child where they're at and then move together rather than be in front of them trying to get them to do something, because it's all about their own understanding as well. And I think that once a family really understands, look, to me, that's the value. There's a reason we do the selective mutism eval. We do it because it helps a family, whether they work with us or they're working with someone else, know the whys. We screen for all the whys that we see in kids with SM. We are able to figure out their baseline stage to meet them where they're at. We're able to see best strategies that work during that SME. We're able to guide them into what their focus and treatment would be at home, the real world, the school environment, one-on-one with peers, with teachers and groups. We're able to realize how we can start treatment with them so that it's, instead of your kid as SM, we want to understand that child. And that SME is based on my Selective Mutism Comprehensive Diagnostic Questionnaire, which is how our research was all developed, to be able to understand the whole person. We screen for the most challenging challenges, toileting, eating, behaviors, sleeping, the quad. All the whys that we see. And we do see more and more individuals with SM that have, co-occurring issues. I think that's one of the specialties we have at the Smart Center, Brandon, is the comorbid conditions and SM. We see plenty of kids that have sensory sensitivities and timid social anxiety, but we see so many that also have other challenges like ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, speech and language, because SCAT is about the whole person. It's about treating the person and understanding their unique needs. And that means accommodating their concomitant challenges. And what a child that is socially anxious may need versus a child that may have some social anxiety and autism spectrum or ADHD or speech and language challenges, we have to alter the treatment, because if you see it as just treat to speak, and being brave to talk without understanding that individual, you're going to end up with some of these oppositional behaviors. You're going to end up with an avoidant child because we're missing the boat. And we see it all the time. That's why the SM School Eval form is so critical, because we're hearing from the teachers of what is this child like in school? What are they like academically? What are they like with their peers, in small groups, large groups? What are they like in school? Because as much as parents want to say, oh, my child's fine, or my child just doesn't speak, we need to understand. It's all about that comprehensive understanding of the individual, because then you're able to develop a comprehensive treatment plan that's specific to that child's needs. And the most important part, in addition to that, is educating the adults in this child's life, in this teen's life, because they have to change their ways too. Because in order to help this child become a more confident social verbal communicator, a parent has to change their ways. They can't just continue on their journey the same way. It's how they talk to the child, how they support the child, how they meet them where they're at. Because guess what? Courage isn't loud.
Let's end there.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next.
Thank you for listening to Unspoken Words, a Selective Mutism podcast hosted by me, Dr. E, and the Smart Center. This episode and all episodes of Unspoken Words is produced by New Edition Productions. Don't forget to submit any questions you have from today's episode using our Ask Dr. E form on our website. Just head to selectivemutismcenter.org/ask-DRE. I'd love to answer your question in a future episode or blog post. Remember, for the best of this episode and every episode of Unspoken Words, please follow the podcast on Instagram and YouTube. We are at Unspoken Words _podcast on Instagram and Unspoken Words by DRE on YouTube. Or join our newsletter for additional SM content. We release new episodes every other Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next time.